Hello, and welcome to yet another Geek Show. This is your host, Dalton Munnell.
This is your host, Alex Ecker.
This is your host, Josh Keir, and let me tell you how much I love you guys. I am sitting here at my desk staring at my unopened copy of Kingdom Hearts 3 and doing this instead. So, you're welcome.
I was actually going to open the show by apologizing to you for having you on here.
I'm also sorry, just because.
We have not yet implemented a call-off system. So, and I'm not going to implement one. We have to show up to work every week.
Absolutely.
So.
Well, if there was ever a test of my dedication, it's got to be this, isn't it?
Hey.
Yeah, well, Josh, why don't you tell us about your experience staring at that box?
Well, the box art is very pretty. It's got that plastic wrap that I'm not a huge fan of because I am a man and have very short fingernails and kind of need like an industrial box cutter to get the plastic open now. It's ridiculous.
Well,
does it have one of those stickers that's still along the top of the case once you rip off the plastic?
No, it does not. Well, actually, I don't know. It's not open, but other PlayStation 4 games I've had don't have that, so we're going to go with probably no.
Okay.
Hey, tell me, Josh, can you tell me your address and your credit card number and which window is easiest to break into your house to come get that game?
No. I'm going to go with no.
Because he doesn't know.
I thought about it,
Are you
but
still imaginary?
I hope not.
All right, so Josh, what have you actually played this week?
So, I have actually been finishing up The World Ends With You Final Remix for the Nintendo Switch remake.
I don't know
Going
what
by
that
the
means,
side,
but it
going
sure
by the
sounds like
silence,
Kingdom
I'm guessing
Hearts.
that this is something I'm going to have to explain. So, The World Ends With You was this awesome RPG that Square Enix came out with for the original Nintendo DS back in like 2009 or 2010. Actually, characters from this game ended up in one of the Kingdom Hearts games. Maybe not. Maybe this one too. I don't know. I think it was the one on the 3DS. At any rate, they did a remaster for it that came out last fall that apparently has some new content. I'm basically wrapping up the original game, and I guess there's some new post-game stuff. Real quick rundown of it is that it's a RPG. It's an action RPG. It's set in Shibuya, Tokyo. So it's like an urban RPG. Not so much like Earthbound, but like way more, I guess, modern. The soundtrack is like entirely J-rock. It's a Square Enix game. I think Tetsuya Nomura did the character designs, and they're very like modern day Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, but it kind of makes more sense in this game because you're playing the entire game in like a fashion district of a hip urban city. So for once, it actually kind of like there's actually maybe a reason for the characters to be dressed as weird as they are. It's okay. I could talk about this game forever. It's one of the best stories that, well, in a game that Square Enix has come out with in a very long time. And I know the bar isn't entirely high on that, but brutal. Yeah, well, I call them like I see them, but it's one of the most unique games I've ever played. Switch remake. It's good in a lot of ways. Like it's like the graphics are a lot better. Everything's high definition. They remastered the entire soundtrack, which is really nice. But they changed the coolest thing about the DS version of the game. The whole game is about two people fighting as a team. So you would have your main character that you would control with the touchscreen on the DS, and your partner character that you also controlled at the same time on the top screen of the DS with buttons. And the way that the game was structured was that you were fighting on two fronts at once, and you had to manage both characters at the same time. There was a little puck that you would pass back and forth between your characters as you did combos with them, and doing a combo with the character that had the puck would either do bonus damage or your character would like take less damage while they had the puck. And you'd be doing entirely different things on each screen. The bottom character would equip a bunch of pins that were like different psychic attacks, and it'd be things like you would slash across like obstacles on the bottom screen, and he would use psychokinesis to throw them at them, or you could draw a line and he would project fire at the enemies, or you'd do things like slash up quickly and he'd like manifest an icicle or something like that. And you'd basically be doing different kinds of button combos with the D-pad on the top screen based on like which partner you were using. Everyone had a different mechanic there. If it sounds complex, it's because it was, but it's one of the most unique battle systems I've ever played, and it was really deep and rewarding to get into, and I used to spend a ton of time playing that game.
So what did the Switch version do to adapt those mechanics that took advantage of the DS?
So, to make a long and disappointing story short, they kind of didn't. So I did a little background research because I was kind of disappointed when I first fired up the game. Apparently, after the DS version came out, they ported it to like the iOS 3 or 4 years later. I completely missed this. I had no idea that it happened. And then when that happened, they also had to adapt the gameplay for one single screen. And instead of, basically they did away with the dual screen mechanic because you don't have something with two screens anymore. All the battles take place on one screen now. You and your partner are in the same area. And instead of having to like combo attacks back and forth with your partner, you had a separate ability for the main battle screen that would like call your partner temporarily to perform attacks. And they kind of tried to keep the mechanic of passing the puck back and forth by having the sync meter that filled up faster if you alternated off attacks between the main character and their partner. And it does an okay job of like translating that mechanic to happen on a single screen, but gameplay-wise, I still think the initial release is the definitive edition. But in any other capacity you could measure the game, graphics, gameplay's the same. Graphics, soundtrack, and additional story content, you would want the later releases for that. But I still think the game is the most fun to play in its original vision.
I almost wonder if the Switch, in order to better accommodate porting DS games for people that just, like, I haven't played a handheld game since the Game Boy Advance. So for people like me that don't normally buy handhelds, for the sake of better porting those games, I almost wonder if the Switch should have came with an option to, the Switch isn't touchscreen, right?
It actually is a touchscreen. So when you play The World Ends With You Final Remix in the non-docked mode, like if you take the Switch out of the dock and you're playing it handheld, you're playing it with touchscreen controls, and it actually feels a lot better to play this way than if you're playing it docked, and that's the other unfortunate thing. So if you're playing docked, obviously you can't touch the screen. So instead, you just kind of point your Joy-Con at the screen, a la like playing with a Wiimote, and you use a cursor to simulate touching the screen. The problem with that is that some certain gestures are now really difficult to perform, where there are a lot of pins which are kind of like, the pins are your attacks. I think I mentioned this. There's like psychic attacks where you would just like slash an enemy quickly. That would be like just draw on it with the stylus or slash across it with your finger, and your character would do a bunch of little quick slashes. Well, now when you're pointing at the screen, it's, hold the button down, draw a line over the guy, and then let the button up, and it's really easy to mess up and just do nothing, or just like do a different gesture that you weren't planning on doing. So suddenly the slash attacks are not as responsive to perform, and I actually found myself changing up my play style to compensate for this by prioritizing ones that were more like pointing and shooting, or keeping your finger trained in a location as opposed to the quick slash attacks that I actually preferred on the touchscreen.
Right. Okay. So it's good that they kept the touchscreen, but what I was getting at was, I think the Switch should have came with the ability, and people have 3D printed a solution, but it should have came with the ability to mount the Joy-Cons onto it with it in a vertical position so that you could emulate the effect of having two screens. you would just have it show up on one portrait screen.
Oh, I see what you're saying now. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to envision this in my head. I guess it could work that way. But the Switch is so tiny. If you had Joy-Con mounts on, I guess, all four sides of it, I don't know where they put fans or the SD card slots or anything else really.
So are the fan exhausts on the top and bottom of it?
They're on the top.
Where
the bottom is, if I remember correctly, I'm looking at my Switch, but it's on the other side of the room and docked right now. But I'm pretty sure the bottom just has the stuff that interfaces with the dock, and the top has your fan and where the games go.
The Joy-Cons would not cover the entire length of the body if they were mounted that way.
They would cover a good 50 to 60% of it, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, so they might have to redo a bit of their physical hardware design there, but ultimately, yeah, I think that would have been the solution to make it really easy to port DS games and not have to put serious consideration into reworking mechanics. I guess they would also have to, in the case of games that relied on the dual screens or the touch screen, I guess they would have to stop the user from playing in docked mode. And maybe that would occasionally upset people, but maybe that would have been worth the cheaper, easier porting.
Maybe.
And higher output of ports in general.
The way I see it is that the 3DS is not that expensive, and it's also backwards compatible with original DS games, which are not really expensive in most cases anymore. So, I mean, if you really want to play them in a physical capacity, it's not too hard to go out to a used game store and pick up everything you need to do fairly cheap. And I don't know if we talk about sailing the seven seas on this podcast, but I hear there are workable solutions elsewhere as well.
So, Alex, what have you played this week?
I've been kind of going back to games that I've started, but haven't finished exactly. I went back to Legend of Dragoon again to get to the final disc, so that way I could understand the plot points again, so I could remember them to explain them later if I needed to. But I started.
Wait, are you saying you hadn't finished Legend of Dragoon before?
Oh, I'd finished it multiple times, but it's been several years.
Okay.
I've been playing Grandia 1 a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice for the time, especially. I kind of wish the soundtrack was a little bit better, but the battle mechanic is something unique for its time as well. I don't know if I can think of anything that's really done it before.
Well, go ahead and explain it for us.
Okay. It's the classic walk into an enemy, battle starts. You know how that goes. But then you get into the combat, and this is at least for the first two games. I haven't played any of the other ones. It starts off, you get an active time battle gauge, but you have little icons that move across it. Okay, so at the start, I would say at least two-thirds of it is a wait time, and then at a certain point, you get this act phase. And that's when you select what you want your characters to do, and then it goes through the gauge till the very end until it's ready for them to move again. Like you select the action you want, it has to slide to the end, and then it performs it. But the really cool thing about it is the more you do that move, for example, your physical attacks are going to be simple enough. It's just going to go straight over, and then they're going to move on screen to attack. But your specials, for example, the more you use them, the faster they get across that gauge. And also the stronger they get, which I thought was a really unique idea, just in the regards that if you don't use it, you lose it, essentially. So with that being said, it makes sense to grind in this game versus I just need to get to a higher level. It's no, I need to get these attacks to beat out faster than the enemy's attacks. So that's what's really unique about it. Also, they have this attack system where you can either do a combo attack, which is just a two-hit attack, which I think does more damage. And then there's another option called critical, which is a really strong move. I think it may do a little bit more attack damage, but I can't be 100%. Anyways, if you use the critical attack, it's just one strong hit to an enemy. Now, as I mentioned before, where you have the act gauge, like the act section of the meter, if you do a critical attack on an enemy during that small section of it, it will actually cancel their attack and make the icon fling back, like the enemy icon fling back to like the beginning of the whole meter.
Okay.
So it's also about timing as well as it
Yeah.
is practicing the character special techniques and everything. It's really unique.
So it comes down to it's a turn-based mechanic that's a little more interactive than you usually see.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have to say it's a really unique story. It's obviously JRPG for sure. Grandia 1, it's, without getting super into it, is you start off as this little kid with his best friend, and they're like making a giant story up in their town, as little kids did. You know, like, you have to find the legendary sword. You have to find the legendary sword, and then they run around and they find a stick. You know what I mean? Like the classic backyard playing. And then eventually it comes to like his dad was like a legendary adventurer, and he wanted to be an adventurer like his dad, so he just decides to set out on one. And that's basically how the story kind of starts, and it's really neat to see, because it's not like it's story driven for sure. It's got some unique character designs, good mechanics in battle. But the story, the way it starts off, it just feels kind of like I want to do it because I can, instead of like there's a reason for this. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's kind of a thing I battle with if I like it or not. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of like having my stories have purpose versus just like, I want to be this guy. You know,
You want to be the chosen one.
exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah. To quote one of my favorite YouTubers, I'm the video game boy. I'm the one who wins.
So Grandia 1 and 2 are, I believe they're both available on Steam. Should I play them?
I recommend them. I started off because I think they were both on the Sega Dreamcast, if I'm not mistaken. I had the PlayStation 2 version of Grandia 2, and I beat it years and years and years ago. And then when it came out on Steam, I bought it and beat it. I had never played the first one up until last year is when I started playing it, and then I just kind of dropped off the face of the planet, you know?
I mean, if we're going to talk about Dreamcast RPGs that people should play, I'm going to say play Skies of Arcadia before you play anything else.
You know, I started
Good,
to
because
play
I've
that.
played no Dreamcast RPGs.
I started to play Skies of Arcadia. Let's be fair, I don't have a Dreamcast. I have a computer. And Dreamcast was probably one of the more confusing things to try and emulate before I discovered like RetroArch and like things like that. So I may have to go back and try to see if
No, Alex, I've never heard of emulation. I own and play all of my games legally.
Whoa, man.
Never even heard of it, but it sounds illegal.
To be fair, I never actually played the Dreamcast version of Skies of Arcadia. I played the GameCube re-release, which, as far as I have heard, kind of toned down the frequency of random battles and fine-tuned a few other things compared to the original Dreamcast release. Point stands that the game is amazing and one of my favorite RPGs of all time.
So,
Well, I think this franchise is actually available on Steam.
oh, is it?
I could be wrong, and I'm
Okay,
totally
well, Skies
embarrassing
is
myself.
definitely not,
I'm
so
pretty sure
I guess
it is.
Grandia gets a point in that box.
For the
No, I'm
record,
referring to Skies. I think it is. I'm going to be embarrassed.
I'm
if
going to look
wrong.
that up
I'm gonna
right
fact
now,
check-
and
fact check myself
if it's
later,
on
but-
Steam, then I'm going to sign off and go play that right now, and you guys can finish the episode without me.
Oh, well, fair enough. I guess I'll get to what I played then.
I mean, Dalton, you've played Dreamcast games like Sonic Adventure, but just on the GameCube.
You're stuck
Well,
with me,
yeah,
guys.
that-
It's not on here.
Oh, well, shit.
Well, that's sad.
Well, you know what, Alex? You're spot on, because I've probably spent an hour total of my life playing on a real Dreamcast.
Yeah.
And the games I did play during that time, I since played on the GameCube. Sonic Adventure being one of them.
Yeah.
The other being whichever Tony Hawk game was on there.
Tony Hawk's
And
Pro
I just
Skater
remember
2.
the sweet little screen on the controller. I just remember it making fun of you anytime you, I quote, biffed it. So that's my memory of the Dreamcast.
Oh, wow. I had a buddy who had a Dreamcast. Whenever I'd come over, we would play a couple of different games. Like, of course, he had Who Wants to Be a Millionaire on there, I think it was. But there was another game. I cannot remember it.
Why is that an of course? Is that like a Dreamcast top
Everybody
seller?
knows that your console's
one
not a
everyone
real
has?
video game console if it doesn't have Who Wants to Be a Millionaire on it.
Exactly.
Which is why I've always maintained that the Switch is not a video game console.
Right.
Oof, Nintendo, step
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Actually, they
Sega
have Wheel
does
of
what you
Fortune
don't.
on there, though.
Oh, well, that's
Put it
fine.
on the Switch? Are you
Yeah.
shitting me?
I'm not joking, man. It's really on there. Last I checked, it was on there. But I forget this one game that we used to play. It was, I think it was called something like Sacred Jewels.
Powerstone.
What was that?
Totally, it's Powerstone. I bet my life on it.
Was, probably.
Was it
I
like a
just
fighting game where you
Yeah,
like
it
ran
was
around an arena and you fought a guy, and if you collected 3 gems, you went into like a super form for a little bit?
Yes.
That's
yes,
Powerstone.
Thank you. That's the game I'm talking
Powerstone,
about.
best
Exactly.
Dreamcast game.
Oh, I know. We had a shit ton of fun with that game. I was always the dude that had the samurai sword, and whenever you pressed one of the triggers, he'd do like the spin.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's been a while. I don't remember all of the characters. I played as the one that was the Goku ripoff most of the time.
Okay. Yeah.
But man, that
Yeah,
game was
okay.
so fun.
That game was the shit, dude. It was so good. I just remember like playing that game like with my buddy. We were just, I don't know, like 12 or 13, and we were just like talking about like, do you ever think I'll find real love? And like, yeah, man, get a girlfriend. And like,
Little did you know
Just,
that you were
like,
playing
shitty, like,
Powerstone
13-year-old
and real
things.
love was in front of you the whole time.
I know, man. It was a true bromance. We would play that game until 7 a.m, and then his dad would come home and be like, "Damn it, kid, turn off the game and go to bed." I was like, all right, fine.
That's terribly sweet.
Oh man.
Yeah, you know what?
Speaking
It
of
baffles
that kind
me
of
that I think they released a sequel on the Dreamcast, but as far as I know, the series kind of died after that. And I always
it
thought
might
that
have
that
been a
was a big
sequel.
tragedy. Like that series could rival Smash Bros. In my opinion if they like continue to develop it.
Yeah, absolutely. It
Well,
was a
if we're
very
gonna
unique style.
revive a dead fighting franchise, my vote goes to Bloody Roar.
Ooh, shit! I forgot about Bloody Roar, dude.
This is actually one that I don't
yeah.
have experience with.
Oh shit,
Bloody
Josh.
Roar is like a Tekken-styled fighter, but they were Animorphs.
You build up a gauge to anamorph yourself
Yeah.
and
Oh,
continue fighting.
I've never played this, but I remember reading about it now.
Yeah, it was a series of. There were probably 4 or 5 of those.
Yeah.
I think there was one on the
Yeah.
GameCube, wasn't there?
There might have been. I was playing it before the GameCube. It
Yeah.
probably had 1 or 2 entries make it that far. I was playing it on the PS1.
Okay.
That was where it was, though, man. It was so good.
Yes.
I was always
So
the wolf
let's move
character.
on. You know what? I don't remember. I'm not remembering the characters very well.
The bunny, I remember being super fucking trolly. That's all I remember. I hated whoever played the bunny.
There was a bat, I think.
Was there a sloth character? I would main the sloth instantly.
No.
Yeah, and
No,
he
but
was
you
so
know
lazy, he
damn
never showed
well.
up in
Well,
the
that's
game.
why the series died, and it was well deserved because they didn't represent the
You
sloth
know
population.
damn well if they resurrected this series in 2019, there would be a sloth.
Yeah, and he'd be the main character, and he'd be the best one.
Oh, geez. Okay, so on to what I played this week. Are either of you familiar with Antichamber?
That is a no from me.
The idea of Antichamber, it's a puzzle game, a few hours long, depending on how good you are at it. And it's the draw to it is that it takes advantage of, forgive me if I use the wrong word here, non-Euclidean geometry is, I believe, the right phrase.
That's a
For being
lot
in
of
something
syllables.
kind of like an MC Escher painting, you know, the dimensions of the world you're in just don't make sense.
Okay.
So it's that kind of vibe. It's making sense of your way around, you know, these levels that.
Wait, is this game like super basic in detail?
Oh yeah, incredibly basic. There's
I've
like
seen this
no
game.
lighting and shadows. It's kind of dizzying to look at, really, because
Yeah.
it's the majority of it is flat white textures, and I don't mean like Aperture Labs Portal style. I mean no texture on the walls, flat white,
Yeah.
no lighting and shadows. And to be honest, I think it actually made me kind of motion sick.
Yeah, I think I've actually seen that game now that you're talking about it. I'm not very good with game names unless it's like super iconic.
Yeah, well, this game, I think it's only on PC. I could be wrong. It could have been ported later, but it has a really good reputation amongst PC gamers. But to be honest, guys, I was not feeling it.
Really?
The puzzles were not intuitive to me. They weren't logical. I didn't feel like the game was teaching me very well.
I kind of know what you mean. There's a lot of games that are like that where they want you to learn as you play, but do a terrible job of letting you play and learn.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like I kind of like how the Angry Video Game Nerd puts it, where he's like, it's one of those where the fuck do I go kind of games.
Yeah, well, yeah, and people kind of call this, I don't know if it's right, but people kind of call this an open world game. I hesitate to use that phrase because it's all indoors, but it's not linear.
Yeah.
You're free to go wherever you want as long as you can solve the puzzles. But the issue is, as you progress, you pick up guns that correspond to colors that enable certain abilities that you need to solve the puzzles, and these aren't explained to you up front anywhere. And what that means is you can waste all kinds of time sitting at a puzzle that you can't actually solve because of these guns that you don't know are in the game.
Yeah, that would be very frustrating very quickly.
So people are calling it open world and giving it praise for your ability to, for it being pretty non-linear for a puzzle game, but it is more linear than I'd like it to be because it's just open world enough to get me stuck wasting time at things I didn't know I couldn't solve yet.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I hate to be a bummer. The game's apparently a classic and people love it, but no, not feeling it. I almost have to recommend it anyway. It has such a good reputation, but no, don't recommend it. I played it for 2 or 3 hours and I just was not having fun. It didn't think it explained itself well enough. Maybe I'm just stupid. I don't know. But even when I did figure out the puzzles, sometimes it didn't feel like they were taking enough advantage of what the unique features of the game world were. I don't know. I guess my point is just it didn't make me feel smart. It didn't make me feel like I was having fun. It's not Portal 2 where you might get stuck somewhere for a while and then when you figure it out, you go, oh, okay, I see. It's this, when you finally solve them in this one, I'm just like, oh, well, fuck you. That's stupid. Yeah. So that's my review. Fuck you. That's stupid.
Is that out of 5 or out of 10?
That's out of 9.
No. Okay, I see.
Fair enough. That kind of brings me to a good question for you guys. Dalton described this game as not having fun. Has there ever been a game that you guys enjoyed but didn't necessarily had fun playing it?
Any horror game.
Fair.
Any good horror game is not fun.
Unless you find getting your pants shat in by you fun. That's the weirdest way I could have possibly phrased that.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. I mean, aside from horror games then, because I often kind of notice something when I play games where I'm like, yeah, I really like this game. And then I'm playing it, but I don't necessarily feel like, wow, this is great. I'm more like, okay, this is what I have to do.
Okay, I'm just going to throw out the first thing that came to mind for me, and that was back when I still played it, League of Legends.
Okay.
I used to play League a lot, mostly out of social obligation because all my friends at the time played, and I very rarely found it fun in the traditional sense. It was just kind of something that we did, and then you got mad at people on the internet because that's actually the only thing that you play League of Legends to do. In reality, you just play it to have an excuse to get mad at strangers over the internet. And I don't think they ever decided, hey, is this game fun? It's more like, how can we continually get you emotionally invested in getting mad at strangers over the internet?
Yeah, that's fair.
Sure. I mean, so there's a factor, a game that you're playing not because you like it, but just because other people have asked you to play it. But alternatively, I feel like when it comes to not just games, but any kind of art, I'm kind of just looking for it to make me feel something. It doesn't necessarily need to be enjoyment, you know? Like, Schindler's List is an incredible movie, but it's not fun. It's incredible because it makes you feel something. So
yeah,
that certainly applies to video games.
My chuckle there was because I never thought I'd hear Schindler's List and fun in the same sentence.
I mean, like, Journey is a top 3 video games ever for me, and I would not call that fun.
Well, it's fun, but
it's touching. It makes me feel something, but I wouldn't say that something is fun.
That's enjoyable, though, and I think enjoying something and having fun with it are, I guess, not technically the same thing, but they're close enough together that I would say that they're very related.
Okay, then let's try maybe. Are you guys familiar with Papers, Please?
I am familiar with it, yes.
Okay, so that game, I played it. I loved it. It's fantastic. I recommend the hell out of it. But the feeling it gave me was pure anxiety the whole way through. But I felt so good when I made it. But, I mean, it's a great game because it had that ability to make me feel something, even if that something is anxiety. But did I have fun? I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure, yeah. I mean, I definitely get that. I'm a huge fan of, like, well, I play a lot of indie RPGs. A lot of indie games in general, and I'm the kind of person that can overlook, you know, relatively bare bones, or I guess you'd even say like monotonous gameplay, if I'm interested in like where the story's going in the game, or if like the themes connect with me, or to do a more widespread example, like have either of you ever played Earthbound?
Familiar, have not played.
I tried playing it. I just didn't get very far.
Sure, and let me ask you, was it because you weren't really having fun with it?
Yeah, I do have to say it was because I wasn't having fun, but I've seen plenty of people talk about it, and they've loved it, and I can absolutely see why.
Right. But I mean, I also can understand why people wouldn't have fun with it. It is pretty much the definition of an old school, like, Dragon Warrior 1 era JRPG, where, you know, the enemies are static, unmoving sprites on a admittedly really trippy background. There's very little animation in the attacks. Battles are long, not even necessarily difficult. They just, like, Earthbound is a very long game. It takes a long time to play. It's not fast. The experience, it's one of those games where the experience as a whole is much greater than the sum of its parts, and the things that come together to make the game so amazing are almost kind of intangible, to the point where it's even hard to describe them. There are a lot of games like that where on paper you could be like, yeah, like, the battle system is the core of the game in Earthbound. It's also probably, like, the most forgettable. It's pretty bare bones. If you've played any basic old school JRPG, Earthbound probably has less going on in its battle system than that. And it's an old school JRPG. You are going to be fighting a lot. So a lot of your time in this game is going to be playing this admittedly not so great battle engine. And it's still one of my favorite games. I don't really know how that gels, but it does.
So as it relates back to Antichamber, I guess more accurately, my criticism, maybe it's not that I was having fun. Maybe it's more that I wasn't having anything.
Just wasn't giving you any kind of response at all.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm, you know, we could argue all day the definition of enjoyment when it comes to video games, but I guess more importantly, it didn't make me feel anything. The art, like the visuals and the music are just overly simplified to the point of it didn't feel like it was even trying to speak to me. It's a game that it's all about its mechanics. It's not trying to offer a story. It's not trying to offer anything meaningful. The music's not exciting enough to speak to you, which is fine. I don't expect exciting music in a puzzle game. But yeah, I guess that's just it. If you're all about the mechanics and those mechanics aren't doing anything for me, then what do you got?
That's a very good point. And I'm sorry, but you put this image in my mind of like trying to put like a square into a square hole, all this like stupid, like dumb puzzle stuff, and then just having the soundtrack of Mega Man 2 playing.
Well, for the record, putting a square in a square hole is a puzzle mechanic of Antichamber.
Oh, goodness. Oh, guys, I have some pretty cool news.
Go for it.
My name is going to be in the credits of a video game soon.
How much money did you spend on Kickstarter for that?
$15.
There you go. What game is it?
I love how you knew exactly where this was going, Josh.
Yeah, nailed it. Got it.
That made my day. The game is called Praey for the Gods.
Okay, this is not one I'm familiar with.
Okay, are you familiar with Shadow of the Colossus?
Yes.
Okay, it's on the same lines as that. It's a survival styled game from what I can understand. I've honestly I backed this game in like 2016. Okay. And they're announcing the Steam early access for the people who have bought it, and they're just now releasing it to the public as a beta or an early access or whatever it is, to see what the public thinks, and then they're going to fix those things, and then sometime in the spring or summer, I think they're going to release the entire game.
I thought I had been hearing about this for a long time.
Yeah. This game has been in development for about 3 years, and granted, the people who paid like full MSRP for like an actual like AAA game have had like the early alpha and beta tests to really help them out. Keep in mind the studios is No Matter Studios, and they are a company of 3 people. Mm-hmm. So granted, 3 people in 3 years to make a really good looking game. If you guys haven't seen anything about it, I really recommend you look. I believe I actually want to say IGN covered them at some sort of gaming convention recently. They were like, they're super cool people. Every time I've come in contact with them, they've been really pleasant, really nice. They've kept up, like every month they do a newsletter and they say, hey, this is what's going on, and this is, you know, what we're trying to do. Like I think the last thing they did was like custom character outfits that you can change and everything. They have a hook shot, which is super cool, and I wish Shadow of the Colossus had. But I don't know 100% about it, because partly this is a game I've been excited about for a couple of years, and I just don't want to ruin anything about the game for myself. So I'll like skim through their newsletter to make sure, like, hey, your money didn't go to waste. We're still doing stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm like that with games I'm excited about. I avoid looking at anything about it.
Right.
Yep. I'd like to talk
this
about
really
the emotional roller coaster that I just experienced while Googling this game, because I just heard about it for the first time. And I was typing it in, and I was saying, I don't know how I'm supposed to spell Praey. Is it P-R-A-Y for the gods? Or is it like, you mentioned Shadow of the Colossus, so maybe you're hunting the gods and it's P-R-E-Y for the gods? Well, turns out that it's neither. And they're spelling Praey P-R-A-E-Y for the gods. And I was not expecting that, and I've been just completely bamboozled. So for all our lovely listeners out there that would want to look up this game, it's P-R-A-E-Y for the gods, and I really hope they explain why they made that decision at some point in the game, because I am just straight up bamboozled.
Well, they noticed their pun, and then they were like, do you think the audience is going to get it? Yeah. But are they really, really gonna get it?
It reminds me
Let's
of
be extra sure.
There's a band that I listened to. I haven't listened to them in a while. I'm gonna have to go back to them. Their name was The Color Morale, and they did that a lot with their song titles. Like the one song is called No Hope. Sounds like N-O Hope, but
that's what I heard.
On paper, it's K-N-O-W Hope.
Oh, okay.
So like they did a lot of stuff like that. I can't think of any other examples, but like it's really neat to see, like, because like if you're like, hey, have you heard No Hope by The Color Morale? It sounds like, oh, so they're just gonna be like a shitty metal band. It's like, no, like oh, okay, like I see where they're going. Like it's a really interesting, like, abstract idea that I wish I could pull off in real life.
Well, puns are fun, but this game's idea of a pun is that's something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Just
this is not something I've ever seen before. So I guess kudos to Pray for the Gods for that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So Josh, have you seen any like images, like stills, or like any like video of it that you're Googling?
I'm looking on their Kickstarter right now, so they have a couple still images on there, and it looks very pretty. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't want to play the sound right now and have it show up on my microphone, but they got some GIFs on here. It's for a team of 3 people. Honestly, this looks very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I was pretty blown away when I seen it. I mean, granted, it's taken them a long time, but it's phenomenal to see what they did.
Yeah, I'll make sure to look into that after the show.
Yeah. I mean, I love to see that. I mean, Team Cherry, the guys that did Hollow Knight, that's a 2-person team. Hollow Knight's one of the most beautiful games I've ever seen in my life. It took them a long time to make that too, but that's what I love about indie games, is that you can really, like, especially from these small teams, you can really feel the passion that they put into their projects, and I love it when it comes together and you can tell that somebody's realized their vision.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I just bought Hollow Knight, so we'll be able to all talk about that.
Oh, let me know. Let me know when you're done. I love Hollow Knight.
Yeah.
I've played Hollow Knight. I own it as well, and
well, I know you have, so let's talk more about it when we've all 3
there we
played
go.
It, because we'll get there.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say
all
like
right.
one thing about it.
No.
Denied.
Yeah,
all right, I'm going to breeze through another meh thing that's, I read this, but I don't really care, overrated, whatever.
Okay.
I just read volume 1 of The Umbrella Academy by Gerard Way. This is a comic book, a superhero comic that he wrote maybe a little over a decade ago. And I've been interested in reading it, but I put it off for a decade.
Gerard Way, as in like My Chemical Romance frontman Gerard Way?
Yes.
Holy
so I put
shit!
this off.
No, that's not
off
true.
forever.
You're fucking with me.
No, it's absolutely true.
All right, don't even explain this to me. I'm gonna go buy it right now. No, but like explain it to me. But know that while you do, my money is going into his pocket.
Well, I'm glad you're a fan. I'll keep this light. I'm not gonna shit on it. I didn't see what people thought was so special. Maybe it gets better later. I don't know. There's not that much of it either. Anyway, I put off reading it for like a decade until I logged into YouTube and discovered a Netflix trailer, The Umbrella Academy, and opened it up and was greeted to Gerard Way's voice in the background music and said, well, shit, I guess I gotta read it now.
Wow.
So long and good night.
My mind is getting blown all over the place today, you guys.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'll keep it to the setup without
please.
going into the actual story. Okay, the setup, they start with a kind of opening panel where it's out in space somewhere, where through the rest of this arc, at least, I don't know about the rest of the story, there's only 2 or 3 arcs. For the rest of the story I've read, it didn't matter again. But it all started in some galactic wrestling match after somebody elbow dropped some kind of space octopus or squid or sea creature.
The galactic elbow.
I could not spend money on this any harder.
And that resulted in the X-Men being born.
Wait.
Not literally X-Men. Just random superhuman babies on Earth.
Oh my god.
Were born as a result of this elbow drop.
This sounds like immediately just your brief explanation reminds me of some sort of like tentacle fanfic.
That's related to something I watched this week.
Oh no.
This isn't that kind of podcast. This is not that kind of podcast.
Was this too also made by Gerard Way?
No, but it was made by Netflix.
All right.
Jesus. Okay. Mutant babies born on Earth. Rich crazy man tries to find as many as possible and adopt them. Plenty of them actually died because they were born as miracle babies to not pregnant women. And so they were, they all either tried to put them up for adoption or just abandoned them somewhere. And so he ended up acquiring, I believe it was 7 of these babies, for the sake of training them into a superhuman team in the future against what will later be a villain of the story. And wow, I guess that's really as far as I can go with the setup. Yeah, setup is crazy rich man adopts 7 mutant babies. And it won all kinds of awards at the time. It was a big deal. Actually, I'm kind of surprised there's not a whole lot of it. Like I said, there's only 2 or 3 story arcs. But nonetheless, it won all kinds of awards. And I don't know, to be honest, it's fine. I'm going to keep reading, but I just went into it expecting something incredible. And it's just fine for superhero stuff. There wasn't anything that, I love my superhero comics, but I hype myself up a little too much when I see a superhero story that's not Marvel or DC, and I go, ooh, okay, let's see what they're going to do interesting, not being stuck in those 2 big cliche universes. And then I read it, and it's not really any different from those. Nothing jumped out at me as particularly, unique or interesting about this, but it's fine. I'm going to keep reading it. Maybe the 2nd or 3rd arc is better. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
See, you just reminded me of something that it's not necessarily a Marvel or DC thing, but I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the movie The Dark Crystal.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you guys knew this, but there are 2 comic books that lead up to the movie.
No, I did not.
I did not know that.
I don't know if you can find them, if they're even printing anymore. But they actually make the movie's universe make sense entirely. And you just reminded me of that because it's neat to see comics that aren't Marvel or DC, especially when they're not I don't want to say this, but at the same time it makes sense. Marvel and DC have kind of gotten an aggressive fan base, and they almost start to feel a little too oh, here goes Marvel or here goes DC. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's a nice breath of fresh air when you see a different comic studio actually make news or make something that's not bad,
Yeah, and I mean, it's, I didn't love it as much as I was supposed to, but it's fine. I'm going to keep reading. I'm going to watch the Netflix show.
Yeah,
I'm going to come on here and talk about the Netflix show.
You're going to have to let me borrow the first issue, man.
Yeah, it's good enough to give all right, sure, read it. On a similar note, I watched the Netflix original Sex Education.
Oh, no.
And so
I didn't know this was a thing.
The correlation there was that one of the characters writes freaky sex stories about aliens and tentacles and shit. And that's all that really needs to be said there. This show... Man, I'm just going to be a fucking bummer this week. I do have one thing to bring up that I loved. But for a third thing, I'm going to say it has a better reputation than I really get. It's just fine. I'll watch season 2. It's just fine. But yeah, Sex Education is a British teen comedy starring, I have never looked up how to say this guy's name, Asa Butterfield. I think
it's Asa Butterfield.
He
was Ender in the Ender's Game movie that I try to forget about all the time because it ruined my favorite book from my childhood.
Ender's Game is my favorite book, and I like that movie more than I'm supposed to.
Really? Okay, well, let's have that discussion another day, I guess.
Wait, scratch that. Scratch that. Speaker for the Dead is my favorite.
Okay, well, Speaker is much better. Much better.
I think the last book I ever read was Dragon Rider by Cornelia Funk.
Ever?
God, I cannot.
Wow. Okay. Maybe we'll convince you to read a book, Alex.
But I can't really read though.
Well, fair enough. Anyway, back to this show. The premise is that Asa Butterfield's character, his mother is a sex therapist, and so he receives
That's
all this
phrasing.
knowledge about sex and the psychology of it that like a 16-year-old normally wouldn't have. And it actually kind of like freaks him out and like makes him have issues like being able to step into the world of intimacy and sex. But he takes advantage of that knowledge he has to start a business at school, being a therapist for the other teenagers. So that's the premise. He can't do these things on his own, but he's kind of coaching the other teenagers mentally to get through their hang-ups.
That's an interesting idea, actually.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, and it works. And if you look the show up on Rotten Tomatoes, it's got like an 80 or 90%. And so I know the percent's different from a rating, but you glance at that and think, oh, this is going to be an incredible TV show. It's just fine. I'll watch season 2, but if season 2 never comes, also fine.
Yeah.
It's like when I talked about You a week or two ago. It's good. Watch it if you're interested. It's fine.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say you have to.
Okay. That's fair.
You know, it's funny because a little bit of what's the name of that phenomenon that after you hear about something for the first time, suddenly you're hearing about it everywhere? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
What is it? The Bader-Meinhof phenomenon or whatever? Is that it?
That sounds right.
I'm looking that up right now.
I don't know.
Oh, it totally is. I'm a genius. Okay, I just needed to pat my own back real quick. Anyway, going back to it, I'd never heard of You since before like You, the show, not like you as a person. It's very awkward to talk about.
Josh, we've known each other for like a year.
I've never heard of the show
I have the
You
same thing, Josh.
until you, Dalton, the human being, mentioned it. The last time we recorded, and then all of a sudden I saw like 4 different people post about it on Facebook the next day, completely unprompted. And it made me. I guess I don't have to distinguish me from the show You, because that's 2 different words. It just made me do a double take because I'd never heard of it before, and then all of a sudden, everybody I know was talking about it. So if everybody starts talking about us at Butterfield Sex School now, then you've got some weird power, and we need to talk about how we can make money off of it.
Absolutely. I don't know if a podcast is the best way to make money off of it.
Speaking of that weird thing we just had with the You show, I remember the one night I came home from work and I looked at my wife and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go get a shower, and she's like, all right, cool. She's like, I'm gonna watch You. And I'm like, what the fuck? And she's like, no, the TV show. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh man, I can't wait for a second season so I can make that joke.
Or you can make
That's fantastic.
Or you can just call it You Two.
Oh,
Jesus. Okay, let me jump to a thing I love since I've been a relative downer.
Not me, clearly.
I assume we all have some amount of history and familiarity with Studio Ghibli.
Oh, yes.
Okay, yesterday I watched for the first time Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind.
You know what? This is perfect. I actually just made Kyla watch that for the first time like 2 weeks ago, so it's real fresh in my memory.
Wow.
I haven't
Excellent.
seen it.
All right. Well, I'm planning right now to. I own most of these movies on Blu-ray. I'm down to do spotlights, but in the meantime, I'm gonna binge them all myself and talk about them a little bit on the show anyway.
What a fantastic movie, right?
My first time watching it, and it's up there. It's a top 3 Ghibli movie for me.
It's so.
And it's the first one.
I hate to use the word underrated, because most of the time people say something's underrated and they're like, "Oh yeah, The Witcher 3 was a real underrated game," but. You don't hear about Nausicaa on like the same tier that you hear about like Spirited Away or like Totoro or Kiki or any of the other like really popular Ghibli movies, but I think Nausicaa's every bit as good as them.
Absolutely, it's definitely a top 3, and I don't know why I never hear people talk about it up there. Like, I like it more than Totoro. I like it more than Spirited Away. It's up there. Maybe it's a little bit too similar to Princess Mononoke plot-wise, but it came first, so that wouldn't be this movie's fault.
And also, this one has Shia LaBeouf as a voice actor in it, making it infinitely superior.
Really?
I watched it in Japanese.
Oh my God. You got to go back and watch the dub. They have top tier voice talent. I'm talking Patrick Stewart, Uma Thurman, Shia LaBeouf.
Well, I do know this because I watched the special features when I was done.
Okay.
And
like Mark Hamill. Like, come on.
One of the special features on the disc is behind the scenes of the American dub being made. And my wife was like, well, shit, we should have watched it in English. Look at this.
Yeah. Just as a general rule, like every Ghibli movie, I go back and watch it, and they have all-star talent on the dubs every time. And it blows my mind to see, like, who's voicing certain characters.
Yeah, it's that Disney money.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's that Disney money. Josh, do you know that this movie was dubbed once before and released in America before Disney was involved?
I did, yes. I have not heard that dub, but because when I was just rewatching it, and I kept hearing Lord Yupa talk and going, okay, this reminds me of somebody. For some reason, Patrick Stewart's name was not coming to my mind, so I wanted to look up who voiced him, and I got two different answers because they had on Wikipedia they have who voiced him the first time, who I can't remember, and then Patrick Stewart in the redub, which was in like the early 2000s, I think.
2005-ish. It was much, much later. Okay, well, the good news is you don't have to listen to the original dub, because here's the reputation of that dub. It almost prevented Studio Ghibli movies from ever being localized elsewhere again.
See, now out of like just a sick sense of curiosity, I want to watch it more.
Right?
That dub, I don't recall the name of the studio behind it, but they cut something like 20, 30 minutes of footage from it and retitled it Warriors of the Wind. And Nausicaa is no longer like distinctly the main character. They cut out a lot of her footage and took her name out of the title.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And as you can imagine, this infuriated... oh, shit, guys. I'm losing my anime cred. I lost his name.
Miyazaki.
Help me out. Somebody knows it. Miyazaki. Yes. Understandably, this infuriated Miyazaki, and he swore at that moment that no one was going to localize them again. And then Disney came to him with that Disney money and basically just promised that there would never be any cuts to his movies.
Wow.
And they've dubbed most of them ever since.
Yeah,
Wow. Okay.
Wow, I would love to see how bad this is now.
Yeah.
I believe there's a VHS rip on YouTube. There should be.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So does anyone else have anything to bring up this week?
I mean, if we want to keep talking about Nausicaa, just the other fun fact that I know is that that Nausicaa was also, I think the manga came first. It was actually a manga written by Miyazaki as well. But
Yes.
as far as I remember, the movie came out, I think, before the manga was finished releasing, and it might cover things that aren't in the story of the movie. I don't actually. I've never read the manga. I have no idea if it's the same story or if it goes any further. But as far as I remember, it that lasted a long time.
At the very least, I know that a lot of it got cut. I don't know if it got actively changed or if the manga went any further into the story, but I know that of what amount of the story overlaps, a lot of it got cut for time.
Well, there we go.
Not that I've read it either.
And I guess we should save the rest for the inevitable spotlight episode.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I suppose so. I guess it's good enough to say it's amazing. It's one of my favorites already, and I'm glad everyone wants to spotlight it later because I could talk about it for the next half hour, but I guess I won't. Was there anything else we wanted to bring up, guys?
I think I'm good.
Yeah, I just keep thinking about Ghibli movies now, so I guess I'm done.
All right, well, I guess we'll start that project soon, and the audience can look forward to that. So thank you for listening to another episode of Yet Another Geek Show. We will see you. I am going to edit the hell out of this and see you soon.
All right, you guys
on our next spotlight on
fun.
Sonic the Hedgehog.
Bye-bye.